This place is my childhood trail behind my house. There are woods behind my house, and I was very privileged growing up to have green, foresty stuff around me all the time. A lot of the kids I grew up with did not have a backyard or anything like that. A lot of them grew up in apartments. I'm privileged. I had a house growing up. And I've always loved nature. I've always loved walking here as a kid. Okay. Whenever I would be stressed out and have a bunch of bad stuff stewing in my mind, I would take a walk back here. I would take my DS. I'd play DS games in the woods. I'd be walking around. I'd be playing, I think, Harvest Moon DS, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks. I played a lot of games, and I remember as a kid, I was totally entranced by the idea of cryptids, things in the woods and whatnot, and this totally seized my childhood mind. So as a kid, I used to read a lot of the creepypastas and stuff online. I loved scary stories, and I think a part of it for me was because I felt like I couldn't really participate in the social activities kids my age were doing. I felt weird, and I felt like an observer. I felt totally estranged from other kids my age, and because of that, because I felt like I was in the background looking in, I was sort of in a wilderness, peering into everyday normal person life. And because I didn't feel like I was in everybody else's midst, I felt more receptive to things stirring around in the background that not everybody else was paying attention to. Now, this is very basic, weirdo, autistic kid type of stuff. I would go to school, and at least the periods of my childhood where I was going to a bunch of mainstream classes and whatnot, I felt super socially overwhelmed, so I would come home and I would walk in the woods behind my house to get some steam off, right? A lot of my childhood dreams consisted of me hearing a calling in the woods for me to sneak out of the house at night and to follow a voice or very tranquil, beautiful music in the woods. Now keep in mind, these woods, if you're an adult, you can't get lost in them. It's not super big. Maybe it'd be annoying to kind of navigate, but come on, nothing bad is going to happen out here. And I knew that as a kid too, which is why there was a stranger element in my dreams where whenever I went in the woods, it was different every single time. When there was a certain threshold, there would be a completely new trail, and it wouldn't be something I was used to. And I would meet strange, whimsical people in the woods, basically. Some of my earliest dreams take place in the woods, where once again I'm called to follow a voice and a very familiar tune. I'd hear some sort of like electronic-y kind of sounding song. It sounded like it was coming from like a game or something. It sounded like MIDI. I would hear like MIDI music in the woods, and I would be super mesmerized and weirded out, and I would try to follow this song, and then I would get lost in the woods, and then I would meet people dressed differently than me, who almost dressed kind of Europeanish, or like old Anglo kind of clothing, and I would meet them in the woods. and they would tell me these secrets. And the weird thing is that I've had the same dreams repeatedly for 10 years. They never ceased to enter into my mind somehow. And I have no idea why, but it would be reoccurring. As a kid, I had a super overactive imagination, probably because I was overstimulated by my environment. I was on the computer at a young age. I was playing a bunch of video games. I had a bunch of behavioral problems, and I used to basically spaz out in class, act totally crazy, and I got kicked out of kindergarten, got put in special ed, was not in mainstream classes for a while. I talked to a bunch of different child psychologists. I was passed around a bunch because people didn't really know what to do with me. I was like a complete nutcase kid. I was hitting other kids. I was just freaking out. And I've had a very strange early impulse as a kid that I was basically never going to fit in with people. I was totally going to be alone for the rest of my life in some capacity. I was never going to have friends, and because of this, I retreated to drawing little characters and stuff, little OCs and whatnot. And I read a lot as a kid, which is probably my saving grace. I'm really bad at probably most stuff, but I think I'm really good at reading as a kid. And I used to have these imaginary friends as a kid, but I always knew that I was in control of them, that I was projecting them somehow, and I was like a ventriloquist. I was puppeting them around. I was imagining them saying quips that I heard from TV and stuff like that. But I remember I had a couple strange things go through my mind when I was younger. And one of these things was when I was imagining one of the characters. I wanted the character to move somewhere in my field of vision, and it didn't do that. It slipped past my field of vision and started saying things that I didn't want it to say. And when it started doing that, I remember I felt a very strange feeling course in my body that it wasn't just my imagination being projected onto something, but it was somehow something extrinsic to my thinking patterns. And at that point, it just felt like something was in my head. I felt totally weirded out. And also the fact that I can't really entirely remember what I imagined these characters to look like. And I didn't really choose 100% the forms that I wanted them to take. I just know that they were people. I took these characters for granted as just being totally normal in my head, and I didn't think much of it. But the more I thought about it as a kid, I started hypostatizing my thoughts or something like that. They became way too real, they felt way too extrinsic, and they made me paranoid that somehow my mind wasn't private. There's a bunch of people peering into my head, and I felt very strange. And apart from that, these characters would show up in my dream, and they would say stuff that they would say in real life that I didn't really necessarily control. And they were really focused on a idea of me wandering outside of my parents' vision, outside of adult supervision, and I felt very strong temptations to do really delinquent, small, minor things, and then like bigger things, like, oh, you should steal something from like a store. But they would mainly, it wasn't like I imagined a bunch of characters showing up and they were just whispering all these crazy things in my ear, and it was like an insane psychosis. It's just when I would be playing outside or something, I would imagine characters appearing and whatnot, and then they would speak to me about stuff like that. And I can't remember the way they sounded. I don't know if I took their voice from something on TV or what, but the fact that they kept consistently appearing throughout, and even as a young kid, I felt like an uncanny rush in my body that I was being watched at all times. It definitely did something weird to me, and I'm not diagnosed with any mental illness or anything. But the strongest thing in one of my dreams, when I was following these voices into the woods, they were all gone by the time I made it to the place that they wanted me to be. And at that point, all the trails around me disappeared, and I freaked out and I woke up, and I had like a horrible fever right after. Another time, when I was personally walking in the woods, I was staying out later than I should have been, and I thought that I heard the MIDI playing, the stupid MIDI song, and then I came home and I was sick, which was very strange. These wood dreams used to persist all the time as a kid. I didn't just have dreams about that. I had a lot of good dreams as a kid, but all of them have been kind of weird or morbid or strange and stuff like that. And it's probably just because of like the media I grew up with as a kid. Like, I don't know. I had dreams that I would go to school and I would be on the bus in kindergarten or a little bit older, but it was always the first school that I went to. And I had dreams that the bus ride would be way too long. I'd be on the bus for 3 hours, and the kids and I would be talking about the absurdity of it, because it'd be pouring, raining outside, or it'd be pitch black, and the bus driver was on our side, and then we'd pull up to the school, and the teachers would be monsters and stuff like that, and it was just really cool. I always liked those types of dreams where I would be trapped in some kind of dingy space like that, and I would have to make the most of it, basically. And it was always amusing to me to kind of deconstruct the systems in these dreams or whatever, right? Because you're like a piece of shit elementary schooler, and you always have something to say about everything. So I always liked those types of dreams. But the wood dreams always felt a bit uncanny for me. They were always motivated by some sort of curiosity to recede into what's in the back of my mind, and slowly disappear in that, and have the rest of the world, the outside world, be obscured, and I'm in this strange, unfamiliar, private place. But it would always work against me in some sort of way in the dream. Like, I had one dream where I went in the woods, and then I came out in some completely other town, some like completely different town in Vermont, and there'd be these buildings around in the forest, like a lumberjack log cabin community, and there'd be washing machines outside, and strange people who looked like they were from Vermont or something like that, and I would be adopted into their family, and I would live the rest of my life in this strange town and explore unfamiliar things and feel totally out of place, and just everything feels completely wrong, and I feel horrible. Nothing, or other dreams where, I escape through the woods into like a town like that, and I see people I do recognize, but they don't recognize me. They have completely swapped names, and like I'm crying out for help for them to lead me back home, and they don't recognize me. Just really basic dreams like that. They all revolved around the woods, and once again, these woods aren't that deep. And I think if I were to try to interpret my dreams, if I were to try to interpret my dreams, I don't think that it's some really cliche, stupid fear of the woods or whatever, or I'm afraid of getting lost. But I feel like it represents some sort of vice that I would start to cultivate in middle school. Because the weird thing is, in my early childhood, I would imagine characters call me out to go to the woods, or I'd follow characters to go into the woods. They would tell me strange things that they didn't want my parents to hear. They were showing me these strange secrets. Or other times I would go into the woods following them, and then when I make it to the destination, they all vanish and I'm trapped, and bad, trippy stuff starts to happen. But as I got older, these imaginary characters stopped appearing as much, and I would just go to the woods on my own, or there'd be some other alluring thing, like I said, music. And it just comes a certain point where it starts to get uncanny with the repetition of these dreams, and especially the part where I would get sick in real life. And the more I had these dreams, the more I would be acting out. And I can't remember my exact rationale, but I personally think that I didn't just have some obsession with something as a kid, but I think that there was something being planted into my head somehow by God knows what. Another time, when I was maybe 6 years old or something, I think I was 6 years old, there were water slides and stuff outside. I was in my room, and behind my bed frame, where my head rests, I saw a character that looked like my sister and was smiling at me, and they told me to go outside because there was a bunch of stuff happening. And then they just phased into the wall after, or something, or they crouched and then they disappeared, and I didn't think much of it as a kid. But that was a very weird thing for me, looking back on it, how I had such an overactive imagination, and I imagine because of that, your real memories become blurred with stuff that you just imagined. But it felt so real, was the weird thing, that there was literally someone just standing there behind my bed frame who was watching over me, and they told me to go outside, and then they disappeared, and then I went out and my siblings were there. And I didn't just forget that my sister was there, because my sister was dressed completely different, and it also didn't look entirely like my sister either. That was a weird thing for sure. Because I had a very overactive imagination as a kid, that would lead me to sneaking past my parents, doing stuff I wasn't supposed to do, and being encouraged by basically super intrusive thoughts to just do little things. Another weird thing about my childhood is I also had very disturbing dreams as a kid, that I didn't totally understand either, that I didn't get from any bad media or anything like that, because when I had these dreams, I would have been too young to have been inspired by something, in which I used to be deathly terrified of my ceiling light, because it's a big glass bowl with these brown spirals, and I used to imagine it as a kid as a giant pulsating, almost phallic looking slug that was melting through my ceiling, and the brown spirals were these eye stalks, and I used to have dreams that it kidnapped me in a giant chamber made of green bricks, where me and all of my kindergarten friends would have to fend it off, or it would literally like rip us apart, basically. And it had like a tiny little mouth hole, and all these strange tendrils and stuff used to come out of it. I had another dream where I was being picked up by all of my uncles, like very young, and they were like laughing, ha 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 ha. And then my uncle Jared picked me up, and he basically, his eyes rolled in the back of his head, and they were just completely white, and he started having a confused look on his face, and through his neck these sacs come out that look super strange and freaky. And there's these, as a kid I called it spaghetti, yellow spaghetti coming out of his neck, but it was like these weird like tendril things coming out of his neck, and they were rubbing all over me, and he's like, and these things were coming out, and I freaked out. And what's weird is that I had that dream when I was like 4 or 5 years old, but I still remember it clearly now. So it was so graphic and strange, and I didn't know what that meant, but it visually looked similar to nightmares I had in middle school. So I mentioned that I had these intrusive, impulsive thoughts as a kid that felt extrinsic to me, that were leading me on to do specific things. Randomly, by the time I was 13 and 14, I had horrible dreams, just straight up awful dreams, that came out of nowhere, where I would be kidnapped by a bunch of surgeons. They'd be cutting me open, putting a bunch of strange stuff in me, or strapping me in front of a TV and showing me these horrible, awful images that I couldn't even comprehend in my dream. I'd have dreams where I would just totally unload on people. Things were leading me on to be like some sort of killer. I had all these evil, horrible thoughts just being thrown at me when I was like 13 and 14, and I didn't know what to do with these thoughts. They were so disturbing and so horrible, just these awful, incomprehensible thoughts. And I had so many just straight up horrible nightmares that I don't even think I can just talk about them in this video. And I'll find a way to write about them and share them, and people can interpret them however they want, but I don't think that I can put them in the video like this. There's a bunch of very disgusting, horrible things just being beamed into my head. It felt like out of nowhere. I would have, because I had these horrible dreams almost every night for like a year that came out of nowhere, I couldn't sleep at all, and I had horrible bouts of insomnia where I was too scared to fall asleep, and I would start hallucinating late at night that I'd hear an entire crowd of what sounded like 500 people, like talking to each other, like walking around my house at like 2 in the morning, and I wouldn't see anybody if I like looked out the window. I'd just hear these loud crowds of people just walking around my house. There wouldn't even be enough space outside to fit that many people. But they'd be walking around, and then it would get faster. I would hear noises in the walls, and it felt like there were strange things trying to break my mind and harass me. and make me go crazy. And when I had other times when I wanted to fall asleep, I felt like I couldn't just fall asleep normally. I would stay awake way too long. I've stayed up for like a day and a half, like multiple times in a week. I was super sick. I was super fatigued all the time. Just very bad stuff. And it felt like there was some sort of force seizing my body and trying to physically exhaust me so something could take over me. And that was a very scary thing. I used to write very unsettling things on my work assignments at school, which would freak out my teachers. They would tell my parents. They put me into therapy, and I was obsessed with occultism, and I was obsessed with sigils. I was obsessed with ancient languages and stuff like that. I listened to a lot of black metal, satanic music, and stuff like that. And I thought that God himself was torturing me into doing something. I thought that I had a life. All of a sudden, all of my dreams as a kid, where I was being lured, my distance that I had with other children my age, and then by the time I was like a teenager, all these awful dreams just about pain and that were very traumatic. It felt like there was something orchestrating small elements in my life to make me do something horrible. And I thought that my fate was sealed to die in some kind of horrible way, or to be martyred in some specific way. And so I was fascinated by the time I was a teenager with something's going to kill me. I'm going to die in a very painful way, and I have to somehow prepare my encounter with my own death and make sure that all the excruciating pain that is extracted from me is used in a valuable way to feed something, to feed some idea bigger than myself. And long story short, I feel like because of certain specific issues as a kid, because I was overstimulated by my environment and had behavioral problems and had to kind of retract from interacting with normal kids and being in SPED and eventually being medicated with ADHD meds, and then being starved and deprived because my appetite would be completely killed and I was super picky with food. I thought in my head that I had to serve something greater than me. I had to dispose of myself in a meaningful way. And I think that because of certain things in my early childhood that set me on a weird course, I believe in the demonic. I think demons are real. And I believe that somehow I had the right combination of ailments and kind of social issues and sensibilities as a kid that made me super cynical at an age where I shouldn't have been. I had the right combination of things for me to be the perfect target. And it's not just the fact that I had very intrusive thoughts at a young age that didn't feel like they were coming from me, because I think any mentally ill person could say that. I don't know how to properly explain it, but I don't think I was demonically possessed or anything like that. That's kind of like an absurd claim. But I do think I was perhaps being groomed by something like that. And it totally skewed my sensibilities. I felt like I knew things at a young age that I shouldn't have known about, down to other things where as a kid, when I was maybe 7 or 8, I had delusions. I had various delusions and dysmorphias, or dysphorias, I don't know if it's the right word, where I imagined myself to be someone much older, trapped in a young body, and because of this, like, I felt like I should have been living a completely different life. And even as a young kid, I felt weird talking to other kids, because it's like, why am I talking to kids? I'm like a 20-something-year-old man, and I would be super disturbed looking into the mirror, even though I still thought like a child, you know what I mean? And it's not like I consistently felt that way. I would just randomly have thoughts like this. And I kid you not, when I had all of these things harassing me, and I started to look more into Christianity, because I was looking into different religions out of desperation. I prayed, and most of the things polluting my head ceased. Most. Not everything. Not my weird, stilted sensibilities, but all the horrible stimuli around me seemed to vanish. Not entirely, but I didn't feel like I was being consumed anymore. It definitely took time, it took contemplation, about thinking about Christianity, praying more, and looking into my heart and seeing what I believe in, for things to totally change. But I feel like I was legitimately saved. I really do. And my life was never the same after that again. My dreams started being more normal for the most part. I had different dreams later on, but I wasn't having intrusive nightmares that much anymore. I felt a lot less overstimulated by my surroundings. I felt less of a desire to act on my impulses, and I think in general it totally changed me as a person. But it really took something very drastic to happen in my life where I felt immense guilt about something, because of a falling out with a friend, that in general, me losing a bunch of other things, where I truly repented of a lot of the stuff I did. I wrote out like a giant confession on paper, and I prayed about it, and I sobbed, and I felt a total change in my heart. I think I've always had empathy, but it was definitely tampered with or dampened as a kid, and I remember always thinking twice about my emotions, if I'm perceiving them properly. And as a kid, I used to look up on Google, do I have a soul? Am I like a sociopath or something? And I would be super concerned about like the status of my heart, and because I'm a kid and I'm already jaded about so much stuff, and I'm really worried, am I like a real person? And I'd also be really scared about solipsism. Is everything just my imagination? Am I just living like a giant delusion? Reading certain internet philosophers and following certain personalities definitely made it worse for me. Fucked up my perception of reality completely. I was super stressed out, and Christianity definitely purged most of that from me. I feel like I was saved. I believe Jesus Christ rose from the dead. He's Lord over everything. He's the Son of God, and He died on the cross for us. And when I started to let Him into my heart more, slowly but surely, I saw all the different issues in my life fade away. I didn't feel like I was fated to do something horrible to other people or myself. I didn't feel like you had to do things through occult means of studying the way the world works and manipulating the principles of the universe to achieve Machiavellian goals. I didn't believe any of that anymore. I totally ditched it. Although I will say that when I first really thought about Christianity, I syncretized it with reprehensible beliefs. I had a very perverted worldview, and I don't think that my Christianity was genuine. So the initial points of me praying and having all these evil things wash away, I noticed my life got immediately better, but things still slowly got worse. And there came a point where, even though I expelled these evil things from my life, it felt like I was reintroducing them again. And really, when I kind of wrote up my confession and I started talking to priests, that's when I noticed like real change that did not feel shaky. I had a taste of what was good initially, but I didn't swallow everything down. I made my own adjustments, and then I started suffering again. And then I thought that I could tread the line forever before I lost something very important to me. And it was only after that I wrote my confession, and I felt sincerity and feelings in my heart that I hadn't felt in a long time, or felt very sparsely throughout my life. Nowadays, instead of feeling totally evil, spiritually corrupted and destined for death, and fated for something bad, I don't really have any of that anymore. I just have sometimes rebellious tendencies, or I have kind of negative tendencies to overthink things and to feel bad about stuff, but I feel like that's just a normal person thing. You know what I mean? Just as a kid, I felt fated for something horrible, and there were these little seeds of uncertainty that made me feel strange as a kid, and made me retreat into these things that were bad for me until they became overwhelming and I had horrible nightmares. And there was something pulling my hand, and I wasn't able to fight against it forever, and I could have even been dead. But I gave up fighting on my own, and I gave into Christ's defense, and these things went away. But I was treacherous, and I lost something important. And then at that point I knew that I couldn't trust myself as a mortal man ever again. But it's somehow through this, it's somehow through me conceding this that I've really felt good about myself, and I felt a security I've never had before. I've had clarity now as basically an adult that I didn't have growing up. And what a privilege it is, because I feel like there's a lot of kids my age that are having their lives subtly orchestrated by something evil and cosmic that they don't understand. You know, through iconoclasm, through modernism, through banishing paganism and creating this giant Christendom, people took their safety for granted and they became materialists. But because of this, the supernatural evils are slowly creeping into people's minds again through New Agey movements, occultism, satanic references in music, people obsessed with ancient religion, perennialism, and all sorts of evil things are happening to people right under their noses, and they just think that it's mental illness. I'm here to tell you demons are real, and they were ruining my life. Because people are raised in atheist families, they're not able to do anything about it. Bad stuff happens to people all the time now. It's gonna get worse too, with the rise of AI and whatnot, and people being totally delusional about VTubers and children using the internet way too young and basically getting digitally molested by people. The evil's gonna keep rising. Jonathan Pajot had a really good video about this. I can't really remember what it was, but he said the same thing. He said that people expelled the supernatural and they built a giant wall around their society, and they forgot about the outside world. But these ancient evils are slowly creeping up into kind of New Age movements, New Age religion, New Age spirituality, and it's going to get worse and worse. I can personally attest to that. I totally felt like there were things attacking my mind when I was younger that I wasn't equipped to deal with. They were deceptive, and they placed their roots deep within my psyche, and then they bursted out when the time was right, and I wasn't equipped to deal with it at all because no one warned me about anything. And I can tell you right now that through faith, I do not have these afflictions anymore. I definitely don't. Not in the same capacity. I'm not saying you should obsess over your dreams. You should not obsess over your thought patterns, because you're going to make the problem worse. And had I known this, I wouldn't have probably gone as crazy as I did before, because I did not have the security that faith gives you. The thing that convinced me was the consistency of these dreams, the reoccurring themes in them that started to kind of bleed into my real life, or vice versa, where, you know, I'd have these intrusive thoughts in real life and then I couldn't escape from them in my dreams. And then it felt very coordinated. Demons are real, but so is God. If you pray consistently, if you make the sign of the cross, you're going to experience these things a lot less. I'll record more vlogs more frequently about less heavy subject matter. I don't know how long this video is going to be, and I might not even release all of it. I'll have to write about it more too. Maybe I can be more eloquent, or maybe I'll just pump something out super quick. I don't know. I'm trying to think about how to communicate with people online, what the best means of that would be. But I'm still experimenting. I'm recording on a laptop because I don't have enough space on my phone. But yeah, I think that the main thing, I'm kind of foolish. I'll become obsessed with something that's unhealthy, and I'll look too deep into it, and it'll take over my mind. So I've really had to narrow down my interests, because I am a obsessive person, and I can get really into the wrong thing. But I became very interested in dreams, which may be either a good or bad thing, because people can be delusional about what they see in dreams, and I try not to go too deep into them, but I've been trying to analyze them, and maybe I will keep some sort of video dream diary, but I don't even know if I'll make it public, because I write most of my dreams down, but sometimes they're personal to me. So maybe I'll only share a couple, or I won't share any at all. I'm thinking that I'm going to start recording more vlogs in these woods, because I feel like I can talk louder, I feel like I'll be higher energy, and maybe I'll be more entertaining as time goes on, because I'm super fucking boring right now, dude. I'm sorry. Maybe that's why I got a live stream, because I'll be more uncomfortable on camera. I imagine if you look at my body language on camera, like I look shifty. I can't help it. I get just super creeped out, and I have to kind of force it out of myself because I'm not natural on camera. But maybe it'll be better. Or maybe I'm overthinking it and you guys can't even notice either. I personally feel like I look super uncomfortable on camera, but still getting used to it. Gonna try recording more vlogs like this, and yeah, like and subscribe, share these videos. Once again, I'm gonna try to upload I can't make any promises because I'm lazy, or I'm working on other stuff. I might do book reviews, something like that. Yeah. Don't give me feedback. Don't give me video feedback, because I know what I'm doing wrong. You can if you want. I know the last video I messed up the gain, and I was too lazy to turn it up, and that's an issue. For the next video, I'm going to try to not do that, but yeah, like and subscribe.